Viewers, welcome back to the show. Tonight's topic is asbestos-related conditions, mainly mesothelioma. And before we get to that, we're going to talk about the Fiskville Firefighters and how there's a lot of talk about setting up a fund and also the plight of the chief, Mr. Potter, trying to get compensation and his claims being rejected. John, what's going on with this, Mr. Potter?
It's a sad story, Tony. Brian Potter, he's lodged a work cover claim for workers' compensation for the cancer he says is directly related to Fiskville. However, it's been rejected. CGU have rejected the claim, Tony.
Isn't it bizarre, Nuncio, and also weird that there's been so many reports and findings that Fiskville has caused a lot of problems to various people, especially the firefighters, and now they've denied his claim?
Yeah, look, I was sort of surprised at that because that big report came out, pages and pages of what they've done wrong over there at Fiskville, and yet they've denied the claim. And look, it's a really unfair set of circumstances, and these innocent people, have to pay for it now.
Now, Tony, we've got a situation where legislation has to be amended, has to be changed, and also in this instance there may be a political solution.
Yeah, well, they're talking about introducing some legislation to pick up those firefighters and people that have been affected by Fiskville.
Potter's Law, it may be called, which may be introduced by the Greens in the State Parliament. We support such a move, Tony. We want compensation for injured workers, and in particular Brian Potter, who CGO have said to him to go and seek charitable funds. I mean, it's just...
Can I ask you this, John? If they don't amend the law, is he precluded from pursuing a claim?
He's not precluded. However, he has to prove causation, doesn't he, Tony? He has to prove, on the balance of probabilities, his cancer arose out of working at that site.
And Nuncio, with the number of people involved at Fiskville, you think you'd have a problem trying to prove factual causation?
That's what I was going to ask the question to John. Said you got that report saying, all those findings and recommendations of what they've done wrong. How can CGU not accept that?
Very supportive. I'm sure they've got their own medical evidence saying otherwise. We'll have to wait and see. However,
it's highly unlikely, Nuncio, that if you produce a line of witnesses, one after the other, saying, I've got similar conditions to Brian Potter,
exactly,
that you won't prove factual causation and link it.
Look, I'd be very surprised if this goes all the way to a court hearing, because I said it could open the floodgates and we're paying out lots and lots of claims. So.
And there's a lot of prospective plaintiffs in the background.
Well, there are, Tony. If you've been affected by what's happened at Fiskville and suffer any disease, including cancer, you should seek legal advice. You have entitlements. You should pursue your legal remedies. Any injured worker in Victoria that's injured in the course of work has a claim and has entitlements.
Just on that, John, let's get on to our topic of tonight, which is asbestosis. And there's quite a few different types of cancers that flow from this, but the main one's mesothelioma. Now, Nuncio, mesothelioma, what is it? Look,
it's the most deadly form of lung cancer, effectively, Tony. And they said once you contracted it, what they say is you've almost got about 12 months to live at top. So it's a deadly disease. And John, a lot of the people that contract this condition, they get maybe exposure, 30, 40 years earlier?
Tony, it's 30, 40 years earlier. It's a latent condition. It can be simply inhaling one piece of fibre of asbestosis, doing home renovations, working in a mine, working at the shipping lines. There's so many instances, Tony, where we've seen workers and their wives and their family that have been affected by the asbestos lining and particles on their clothes, and that's been inhaled. The particle is literally stays in you, and 34
and manifests over a long period of time.
34 years later.
We don't want to create this environment of panic, but sadly, this condition is going to pick up a lot of different people, including housewives or home duties,
yes,
and children, because they would have shaken overalls and the particles would have been in the air, exactly, and inhaled.
How does it start, Tony? Is it the pleural plaques, which is...
Yeah, what happens
is the start of the process?
What happens is there's changes in the lining of the lungs, and there's usually what they call pleural plaques. Now, at that stage, you don't have the condition, but over time, those pleural plaques could become cancerous, and then you've got mesothelioma and other conditions. So that's the process. So if people suspect that they've got this problem, they should go for an X-ray of the lungs, and that can determine where you're at. Look, you could have the plaques and go on indefinitely without any symptoms. So you shouldn't really go into a state of panic, but ideally you should be getting treated and getting the proper advice. Let's get on to the current state of the law. There's been two significant decisions in the last, say, 18 months. The first one's a matter of Amarca and Booth. It's a High Court decision. Nuncio, do you want to give us the background facts of this case?
Yeah, well, this is the most significant decision because obviously the High Court of Australia, which is our most prominent court. This is a case in which Mr. Booth was a mechanic and worked for various companies as a mechanic, and he contracted mesothelioma due to asbestos in the brake linings at two particular manufacturers, which was Amarca and Amava. And in this case, because of that, he then started an action which initially started in the Dust Disease Tribunal in New South Wales, then was appealed, went to the Supreme Court of Appeal there, and then went to the High Court of Australia.
Before you get that far, Nunc, what happened in the first instance?
First instance, it was found that the mesothelioma was caused by the asbestos from those two manufacturers.
And then it was appealed, John?
And the High Court upheld the Court of Appeal decision. Tony, after the break, we'll continue with this discussion.